Thank you for joining the Resilient Cyber Show. My name is Chris Hughes. Today I'm joined by Mark Simos. Mark, thanks for being here.
Thanks, man. Great to be here.
Yeah, I've been following you on LinkedIn. We crossed paths many times, and I saw this talk you gave recently about cybersecurity anti-patterns, and I was like, oh, I really want to dig into that because I feel like we create so many problems in cybersecurity with the behaviors that we kind of perpetuate. But before we dive into that, for folks that don't know you, don't know much about your background, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I've been at Microsoft about 24 years now. And for those that don't know, there's actually a tradition to get your name engraved on like this very large series of plaques on our conference center wall. So I'm like, yay, maybe I can last a little bit longer, get my name on the wall. I haven't been fired yet so far. But I did everything from support. I literally was part of the very first teams that were supporting Active Directory, and it was always DNS. I mean, literally always. I could close my eyes, kick my head back, and just tell people exactly where to click because it was always DNS. Um, and then I went on to be field engineer, consultant. I did security kind of throughout, infrastructure and whatnot, consulting for a while. And then I really went full time on it in about 2010, 2012-ish range. And so, joined the cyber team, and I've been watching this, thing grow from a small consulting thing into a, genuine business, and then into whatever we are, $20+ billion, and just all of the mechanics of that and the support of it and the expertise and the training and the reference architectures and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been a heck of a ride, dude. I feel like I've been through like a Harvard Business School lesson kind of case study and watching this thing do its thing. And so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. Like you said, Microsoft has essentially transformed itself into one of the leading cybersecurity companies by revenue. It's impressive. It's amazing. And you've been around for that whole ride, which I guess likely has informed a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today. But, you gave this talk, right? Cybersecurity anti-patterns. What made you think to give this talk? Was it things you were seeing? Like, how did it come about, before we dive into some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been putting together kind of piecemeal over the years, didn't realize what we were building towards kind of in a way. This thing that we now call Security Adoption Framework, or SAF. And, because there's so many different aspects of security. I mean, you're talking security operations, identity, infrastructure development, data, IoT, OT, I'm naming off the modules of it, obviously. But we had to go through this, and there was just so much we had to do to frame out the problem in each of those particular areas, because the things that are broken in a SOC, the things that people need to work on, et cetera. And it just became so long-winded to be able to explain it. We're always looking for efficiencies and shortcuts so we can get to the quick and actually get to the point where we're actually helping people. And here's the best practice, here's the metrics, et cetera. But you don't want to have to explain the why behind it for 30 minutes each time. And essentially it became almost kind of a life hack type of thing, where we just basically started just telling people, listen, this is what everybody screws up. We're not saying you screwed up, but this is what everybody, generally gets wrong. And we found it was just a really efficient way to get to that point where we can get to an understanding, get a laugh out, because most people are like, I had one person, because I was just kind of skipping by the anti-pattern slide, no, go back. Yeah, we've done all those. I mean, we literally made all those mistakes. And so it's just a great way to sort of, because we're all critical in cyber of ourselves, of others, et cetera. And so it's just a quick way to get that done. And so once we've discovered the magic of that, we're like, okay, this is our pattern, is to put the anti-patterns in all of these, and it just shortcuts the discussion and gets us to the point where we're helping people faster.
Yeah, honestly, I was looking at this. I've been doing cyber about 20 years. And I was looking at this, and I was like, "Yeah, I've seen that one. I've seen that one." And I'm still seeing these things. And so let's walk through some of these. The first one that I came across was technology centric thinking. Thinking about how cybersecurity is about technology rather than business assets. Can you explain that one a bit? How do you think of that?
Yeah, it was interesting because this one we kind of attribute as a root cause to multiple other anti-patterns, because the anti-patterns are a little bit more specific to certain areas. But the thing that we found is, I think back to when we were, I started in the IT industry in the 90s, 2000s, basically. And when you had a network security problem, you bought the appliance with the purple bezel. When you had an email security problem, you bought it with the orange bezel. I could be getting the colors wrong. Someone's probably going to correct me in LinkedIn or something like that. But you had the colored bezel things that went in the 19-inch rack, and that solved a problem, right? And we've that was sort of what anchored ourselves, I think. And then it led to, hey, as over time people bought box software for a problem. Sometimes they still stick to iron that they were put in a rack. And then it got into SaaS apps for it. But this whole tool to problem kind of mapping idea, and that security is a technical problem, and we work under the CIO, and they expect a technical solution for technical problems, as do the business leaders above them. It sort of just got reinforced in a lot of ways. And so, we see this like instantiate in like dozens, if not more kinds of ways, where, people just keep trying to slap it. Like my favorite one, the counterexample to this, business email compromise, right? Someone sends an email and says, give me your password or approve this wire transfer. There's nothing wrong with that. Email is doing exactly what it should be doing. There's no exploit. There's nothing. There's no tool or technology or vulnerability in there. You're just tricking a person, right? And so there's no technical solution for it. And yet we still try to put phishing filters and this and that and all the other stuff in there. And it's like, it doesn't work. You've got to fix the process controls. You've got to train the people. You've got to sort of rethink that. And then maybe there's some technology stuff that can automate some of that stuff. But the reality is, the problem is that someone is willing to click on something and they have the knowledge of the process level that encourages them to do the wrong thing. And so, I don't know, that's just the way I see that space.
Yeah, that one made sense to me. I feel like, I've been saying in some articles I write recently is like, security is not something you buy, it's something that you do. Because we often, we think like, oh, just buy X tool and then you'll be good, right? And it's like, no, there's like people and they have behaviors and there's processes, and like it's bigger than just, plug a product in, you're good to go, right? And we see this a lot, even with like zero trust, for example. It's like, oh, we bought X, so now we're doing zero trust, or we bought, this other product, so now we're doing DevSecOps. It's like, no, you bought a product. Like you're not, you haven't changed anything fundamentally necessarily.
I mean, like literally vulnerabilities, because I was creating a prioritization slide, right? And, first thing is the stuff that's hitting you, your neighbors, or, your nearby industries and whatever. Second thing is the stuff that's been proven, but hasn't quite hit you in your block yet, right? And then the third thing is all the theoretical possible things. And I ended up having to put a little sideways 8, an infinity sign at the end, because literally we have these super complex people, process, technology, business systems, technology systems all intermixing, and they're literally changing every day, every time a dev checks in code or somebody applies a patch or someone adds something. It's like we have a functionally infinite set of vulnerabilities, and there's just no way to solve them all. And so it was just sort of this realization that like, no matter how much you want to, it just won't work.
Yeah, it speaks to another point you made in your talk, which is like the silver bullet mindset. If I just buy X, right, then I'll be good. And it's like, you're pointing out like we have this complex environment with all these interdependencies and all these things going on. Like, explain the silver bullet mindset that you talk about that you see so often.
Absolutely. And it's not too, I mean, there's definitely a Venn diagram overlap with the technology centric thinking as well, because the idea is just that, hey, there's going to be a perfect solution for this, or I'm willing to believe someone when they tell me there's a perfect solution. Kind of junior folks don't know any better, and they think, oh, a SIEM magic, an XDR and EDR magic, right? Because they don't know better, right? They just haven't been in the industry long enough. Once you get to sort of that mid-career, late-career seasoning, you've been to a Black Hat or a DEF CON, and you've sort of, looked into the crack of space-time, like, in the Doctor Who thing, their coming of age kind of thing. You sort of realize, okay, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. But the funny thing is people still get caught up in it, because I can't tell you how many experienced people will say, oh, we're not going to do that because you could get around it like this. Okay, so you're saying you have a 0% solution. Someone just offered you a 60% solution, maybe even for free, that you're already licensed for. Sorry, at Microsoft, we over-license everyone. And you're saying it's not 100%. So I'm perfectly happy at 0%. I will starve instead of eating that food I don't like. I'm like, that's still silver bullet thinking. Like, we've got to get ourselves out of this binary 100% or nothing, which is, maybe it's a technical engineer thing. Maybe it's a spectrum thing or whatever. But like, it's just Like we see it over and over and over again where people it's like this insidious thing, because we all like shortcuts, right? Every human in the world loves shortcuts. But like when you say it has to be a shortcut or nothing, you don't have a shortcut for everything.
Yeah, I think the human nature aspect that you bring up is so true, because it's just like, fitness or finance or anything else. Like we're looking for the quick fix or the pill, or just, something quick to fix it. It's like cybersecurity is more complicated and nuanced than that. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that as much as we wish it did. It just simply doesn't work that way. And you also go on to talk about, what you call the paradox of blame. And this one made me laugh because I see it play out a lot in different organizations, among different teams and different, leadership and et cetera, like where it's like this CYA mentality, as you talked about. Security warns about issues, they're skipped. Then, something bad happens, security gets blamed. And I feel like in some ways, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like in some ways with like the rise around like accountability and litigation for CISOs and liability and all these kind of things, we're seeing this play out in a really weird way where like security is like advising the business, like, hey, there's these things that, need to be fixed and you should be worried about this. And the business, like, right now we have too many other, competing priorities or things that we're doing. Then something bad happens and the CISO gets like, fired or thrown under the bus, or even, there's a legal situation. It's like, hey, I tried to warn them. I tried to, but the business is, they have competing considerations, constraints, speed to market, revenue, et cetera. Like, what's your thoughts on this, the paradox of blame when you talk about?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm starting to appreciate more and more that this is like the big mama root cause of so much of what we all experience and complain about every day. And like when I started comparing it, because like to other different disciplines and other business support functions, because that's what security is at the end of the day. You've got lawyers, right? You've got HR people, you've got finance people, your CFO, your legal counsel, the whole kind of thing, right? You've got all these support functions. And if the CFO says we only have $1 million, if you spend 900,000 of it, we're probably going to go broke, and then they spend the 900,000, do you blame the CFO? If the plant safety officer tells the plant manager that this is a dangerous, hazardous situation, you need to address it, here's our list of recommendations, and the plant manager says, no, we've got other things to worry about today, and then someone falls in the vat of acid because there's no railing, do you blame the plant safety manager? No. It's just like if one of your managers says something completely inappropriate to their secretary, do you blame the HR guy? No. People have to be accountable and literate in all these different subjects. Yeah, the world's complicated today. Now, that's the thing that's sort of broken. And security, I feel like, has a duty to inform, a duty to advise, a duty to execute whatever the decision is. But security does not own the duty to decide. They do not have that power and responsibility. And this really, this is something I believed for a while, and it really came home for me actually during the recent hurricane, during, gosh, there's been so many of, not Helene, but I can't believe I just blanked on it. Milton, Hurricane Milton. There we go. Just came by. They're just hurricanes to us. I mean, the names mean something to other people, I think. But ultimately, I wasn't the advisor. I was the decision maker. It's the old Clash song, should I stay or should I go? Right? Like that is a one-way door, to kind of, borrow from Jeff Bezos there. Like you make that decision, you live with it, and then you make the best of that decision. That's how it is. And, it was kind of on me and my wife, on what do we do with our family? Right. And so we weren't in that sort of privileged position of saying, hey, based on this and this, this is what we think you should do. I was in the position of I owned the consequences of that decision if we stayed there or not. And by the way, everybody's okay. So just in case anyone's worried about that. But it was just sort of an interesting thing to be able to flip roles for a little bit. And we've got to have empathy as security people. We've got to understand and feel what it feels like to own that decision. And if you get it wrong, if you spend so much on security, you miss the market. If you skip the security and then you get a ransomware and it's on you. Like we've got to feel that, but we also have to recognize it's their call and they know all the other factors. We're not in the finance meetings. We're not in the business strategy meetings where they say, if we don't make this market, the company will have to lay off X percentage of the workforce. Like we're not part of those conversations. I mean, in the ideal state, we are, right, as a CISO level. But like we've got to remember and empathize with that and give them that, but they also, on the other side, have to feel that accountability, right? That the security stuff is on them. I don't just get to fire a CISO every 12 to 18 months if and security teams at will, and imagine that things are somehow magically going to get better, right? And so there's a whole lot of brokenness there that we've been looking at this wrong, that the royal big we of how to deal with security. It's just like having a lawyer, having an HR person, having a finance person. We've got to think in those terms and say, I'm just a business support function. It's your decision. And I want you to make the best one you possibly can. I'm going to give you the best information you can get in a language you understand.
Yeah, I like how you frame that, because I feel like sometimes, in security, we do have a hard time empathizing with our peers, and it's hard for us to grasp, like, why is this not the most important thing in the world to them? It's the most important thing in the world to me. And it's like they're looking at a broader business context that we don't often see in some cases, depending on your role and seniority and things like that. So I really like that framing that you did there. And then you talk about, in there, the phrase of, being the office of no, right? And I feel like we saw this, early on with cloud and SaaS and mobile. Now we're seeing it with AI, like where by nature, security is very risk averse. And like we want to take time to evaluate something, and like, we don't want to jump in too quick. And then the business, they're going to do what they're going to do. They want to move out. They're afraid to lose to, peers and be left behind, or lose competitive advantage, or, things like that. And then it leads to this virtuous cycle or downward spiral, as you talk about, where security now has to be bolted on rather than built in, because we didn't work collaboratively from the onset. They thought we were going to be a blocker. Like, how do you navigate that one? And how often, I feel like I see this one so often.
Oh yeah, that one's a tricky one. The thing is it always creates a loop, right? Because as soon as, whether you're high power or low power, it always creates a negative feedback loop, where security's high power and they say no, and the business decides to go around it, and then they say no harder, and then they go around it harder, and they say no harder, and they go around it harder. I mean, it's funny how that kind of builds up, but I think it's a direct result of that same paradox of blame thing, right? I mean, it's just because people don't feel the accountability on that side. The big thing, I mean, obviously the long-term fix, right? The best one is that you've got a CISO that can speak the business language, that can express it in those terms, that can get credibility and get the slice of time and reach the hearts and minds of CISO or CEO and board and CFO and all the others, and like start changing the culture. And it's no longer it's the business and security. It's I am the business as a security leader, right? Like getting to that point is the ideal way of fixing it. Now, obviously, there's plenty of situations where it's like, shut up and color, right? You're the security person. I'm going to blame you when something goes wrong. Shut up, or I'm going to take your pay away and replace you with somebody else, right? So there's definitely all sorts of different circumstances. So like if you're in that position where you don't have that influence, the best thing to do is kind of take that attitude and approach. Like, say I'm an architect, say I'm a director, say I'm a manager, or lead engineer or something like that, but still take that attitude and work with the IT people and say, hey, listen, man, I want to tell you about these kind of attacks that are hitting servers like you manage. Let me tell you about some of the container things that we're seeing, because you know more about servers, you know more about containers, you know more about your app than I do. Like, I know the attacks and stuff. I know all the different mitigations and recommendations and all that, but I don't know your systems as well as you do, because that's one of the things that security people don't quite get flipped in their head right, is that we are not the best people in these systems, and we're not going to come up with the best solutions, and we're not even going to be able to imagine the attacks as good as them. All we have to do is educate them, help them, and say, hey, listen, this is the stuff that we're seeing. These are the kind of attacks that we saw as an example. Is that something that your server would be vulnerable to? And is there any way I can help you? So taking that same sort of, I'm a service provider to you, I'm helping you, I'm in service to you. Like, you can do that at any level. I mean, ideally it's being done at the top down and it cascades. But at the end of the day, after all that stuff is said and done, they're going to put you in a room with the IT people, and you're going to have that conversation anyway. So see if you can shortcut that. And again, hearts and minds, just connect with them. They're geeks just like you. They just focused on some other thing and they got assigned to do some other thing for their jobs.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, as someone who's done this, 20 plus years on your end, a lot of the things you're talking about in here, like, obviously there's technology involved and stuff, and it goes back to the technology centric thinking you talked about. But you're talking about empathy, collaboration, building relationships, rapport, trust, empathy, these kind of things. Like, I feel like it's an anti-pattern in the sense that, we don't foster and develop these soft skills, I guess you'd call them, right? When we think about our peers and how we interact with the business, and to our own detriment. Like you're proving countless ways where it plays out, So, someone who's done this for quite a while, like, any recommendations for folks earlier on in their career, like when it comes to like building those kind of skill sets that are going to serve you far more than any particular technology or expertise around, a certain domain like that?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately it's a skill set, right? And everybody sometimes calls them soft skills and diminishes them. And, oh, they're not technical. I hate that phrase, by the way, because it's mostly used against people that it's not true of. But at the end of the day, like, first of all, I mean, we all have friends. We all have people we connect with, right? And so that's part of it. Just recognize you have a shared mission. You have a shared fate. Nobody wants to be in an incident at like 3 a.m. on a Saturday night doing that stuff instead of whatever else you want to be doing at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night, right? Like, so that's part of it. And then, there are a lot of things, like LinkedIn has a bunch of different, skills and whatnot. Yes, there's, some noise and some other stuff and people over promoting and stuff, but there's great free LinkedIn training on those kind of things. There's a lot of places you can pick up these skills. Like for me personally, I made this realization, going back about 12 years now, that I went and I stopped thinking of myself as a technologist. I started to realize, because I was actually presenting and describing a fairly complex architecture at the time, like 10, 20 times a week, Admin Forest or Red Forest or ESAE, for those that follow that stuff from the Microsoft thing. And I was describing this and the pass the hash attacks and whatever, like 10, 20 times a week, right? Like just over and over again, 2-3 times a day. Just that was what I did. For a good several month period. And about, I guess, a month or two into it, I started to realize that I was no longer a technologist. I was a storyteller telling technical and cybersecurity stories, because the technology itself didn't change on any of those things. What I was able to change, what I was able to control, was how I could tell the story, how I could connect with the people, how I could understand them. And I started thinking of myself as a storyteller, and I started looking for and reading storytelling books. I started reading communication stuff. I started looking at myself through that lens, and my career and my ability to actually execute and do things has gotten hundreds of times better, if not more. Just because I started to recognize that it really doesn't matter if you can't get that other person across the cube aisle or across the Teams call or Zoom call or whatever. If you can't get them to understand the concept, to care about it, and then understand how to do it. There's like this why, what, how chain that I'm a big believer in. If people don't know what the heck you're asking them to do, it ain't going to happen. If they don't know why you think it's important and why in their terms, it ain't going to happen. And even if you get them bought in and they want to do it and they don't have good instructions on how, they're still going to fail, right? You've got to be able to connect that why, what, how, and just thinking of yourself in that way and thinking about your personal professional identity or professional identity. And then the skills that you need to develop and, finding the resources that fit that and getting better at that, and refining it and treating it just like you would a technical skill. Like, oh, I'm better at IP routing. Well, I'm better at communicating with people. It's the same kind of thing. You're just building up that pillar and getting better at it, and your career benefits.
Yeah, I won't add much to what you said, because I think it was spot on and excellent. But I'll disagree. Like, as I've went through my career, and I've went real deep on certain technologies and becoming an expert in certain domains. But like learning how to just communicate with people and like have relationships and build trust and understand what they're incentivized to do and why and so on has like done so much for me, far more than any technology. So I really appreciate you dropping
that question of like, hey, we're going to be working with such and such or whatever. Okay, how are they paid? That's the first question I need to know, is like, how are they paid? Okay, now I can talk to them and where do they come from, their background and all that. Now I can communicate with them much, much better, because I know what they're being asked to do and what they're going to get beat up about by their boss if they're not doing it.
Yeah, and in a funny way, it's almost like social engineering. Like, what are they incentivized by? What do they care about? What are they passionate about? All those kind of things are critical to like really driving towards secure outcomes for the business, which is what we're after.
Social engineering is just persuasion for a malicious end.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We're doing it for good here. Ethical social engineering. So I wanted to say that, we've run the gamut, of the security adoption framework you talked about, a lot of these anti-patterns and recommendations on how to break them. I wanted to give a plug also. I know you have a book out there titled the Zero Trust Playbook, I believe it is, Zero Trust Overview and Playbook Introduction. If you want to talk about that and, any other things you're working on that folks can check out.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I've got kind of like arguably four things I do, and all of them involve end-to-end security. So the security adoption framework is my Microsoft thing. I work on this playbook as well. It's a series. So this is the first one that's out, and we're working on the SOC one, the leadership one next. And it's basically a role by role. Here's how to do modern security, right? Zero trust is the lens of it and the branding of it. But at the end of the day, it's just how to do security right. The day in the life, the metrics that you should be there. We're looking at even adding like reference job descriptions and stuff like that to help hiring managers and whatnot. But it's a complete walk down of like, what is the outcome? What does success look like? What is a day in the life? How is zero trust changing things? How is AI changing things? How will quantum change things? And all these kind of things that you need to know in that role, whether you've been doing it forever, you're trying to figure out the differences, or whether you're new to role or just trying to figure out what to learn and train. So we're really trying to make it like a good general reference in a role by role way. And so that's sort of the Zero Trust playbook series. And the first one's out. It's an introduction. It's actually some of the hardest writing I ever did, because it's meant for everybody from a boardroom audience all the way down into like a reverse engineer. And getting human normal language to describe cyber terms, and still, linking in some of the industry specific stuff, but not relying on people knowing that. Like that was, the amount of rewriting we had to do to get that clean. It felt like I was scrubbing the floors with bleach 17 times over to just clean it up. It was crazy. And so, we've gotten good compliments and whatnot. So people are appreciating it, they're clicking. And so, love for folks to check that out. And then, the third thing I do is around the open group. So I've been part of the Zero Trust working group for a while there, for 2.5, 3 years now. And then recently, because I wanted to connect the open fair, the quantitative risk management stuff closer with the Zero Trust thing, they had an election. I was like, what the heck, I'll go for forum chair for security. And so I'm actually a security forum chair over there and help guide and steward those standards. And then, I kind of got it and I was like, oh crap, now I need to make a vision and make it make sense. And like, how do I connect these two? And so we're kind of in the process of doing that. I actually got a conference in a couple of weeks where we're going to announce kind of the vision, the direction, where we're going with that. I think it'll be recorded. So, I'll be, promoting and posting that out for those that can't make it to Houston. And, doing some interesting work there, because we realized those roles, we don't want to lock them up in the playbooks. And so we wanted to put those in the open standards. So we moved those over. So those 72, I think it's a 72 right now, different roles, from board to CEO to reverse engineer to business analysts and architects and IT and development and all that kind of stuff. And what is, we're putting sort of that core of it into the standard. So what do you do in security? And then what happens if this role is not doing their security job, right? And it's all of them, including the business and the IT side and everything. And it's been a really interesting exercise to go through that. And so that's kind of the third thing I'm doing. And then, I've got a few select organizations that I do security advisory boards and whatnot for, just to make sure that I'm not just imagining all this kind of crap. Because, I've got my Microsoft, kind of validation internally as well as our customers. But it's really nice to actually sit on an ongoing board and help guide an organization and see the questions that develop as they naturally, okay, we took this advice and now we ran into this problem, and, kind of have that deep perspective. And so, that's kind of the different stuff I do. So appreciate it.
Awesome. Definitely. I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, check out his Zero Trust book. And also, if you want to find the talk, it's called You're Doing It Wrong, Common Security Anti-Patterns. It's on YouTube from RSA Conference, and you can find the slide deck as well. And I will say the slide deck, not only is the content great, but it's got a lot of great visualizations and graphs and like just great ways to like kind of, visually communicate the information too, which I really enjoyed and love sharing with folks too. So Mark, thanks so much for coming on, and thanks to everyone who tuned in as well.
Awesome. Appreciate it.